I'm retired, so it's good to be reminded that I am a chartered accountant, and still, a chartered accountant always will be a chartered accountant. And I suppose the topic applies to us wherever we are, where we serve on boards, in the community. Our name is actually very important. So I've been asked to talk about ethical leadership and future-ready leaders. I'm probably going to be unconventional today, probably not give the speech that we expect, but because I know that this topic is being thoroughly dealt with today. So there's never been a time in the world where we need ethical leadership. And we know that in South Africa, we need ethical leadership. And we started really focusing on this topic when we saw the rise of corruption. And when it started, we just got worried because we had seen the impact of corruption in the rest of the continent. But what we see now is that we've just not been learning the lessons. Things are getting worse. With the revelations that are happening now, with the establishment also of the Madlanga Commission, I just wonder, where is the bottom? We don't seem to be reaching the bottom, because I always feel that when we reach the bottom, we wake up when the thing is no longer tolerable. But we seem to be tolerating this situation. And the big thing about corruption is that it becomes a culture, permeating every sphere of the country where it is, as we've seen again in the rest of the continent. And when it does that, nothing is spared, because even our own profession was not spared. You would think that, I always believed that it's a sacred profession that cannot be touched. It was a shock to all of us that it even touched us. And now the judiciary, when that happens, it's a scary time, because it says there are no guardrails. Anything is possible. But the sad thing about corruption is that its impact on society generally. We talk about corruption in terms of the public sector, but the stories that are coming out in the private sector, the high levels of corruption in the private sector is actually shocking. I'm not talking about corporate standards, corporate scandals, because those scandals have been there. They still continue today in spite of all the work that we're doing around governance. And I suppose, that's why we're here today, to say, how do we stop this? How do we return back to values, back to basics? I always say, as a profession, we just need to go back to basics, because when we were growing up and being young in the profession, to us, ethics was paramount. We were taught at school about ethics. So that's why I always believed that it's sacred. So this impact on society in terms of its destructive nature. You've seen the collapse of institutions, the state-owned companies, dysfunctional municipalities impacting on service delivery. It's just horrific in a country where there's still so much to do in terms of regressing the past. I just want to move now. I always say that the cost of poor leadership is high. Yeah, we can really just see the cost in front of us. I just want to move to share just a few points on the principles of ethical leadership. I know that it will be covered broadly today. The first one for me is values. Values are key, and we need values that are clear, not just fancy values that are written on a piece of paper or adorn the walls within the organization. Values have to be lived. And how they get lived is when we have programs to embed the values. And when leaders actually display the behaviors that are aligned with the values. And leaders it must be clear where you stand in terms of ethics. These things must not be ambiguous. You know, your people need to know. When you talk about tone at the top, we're saying we have to know as your followers where you stand on ethics. Otherwise, things fall within the cracks if we don't. The second one for me is establishing ethical culture. And one of the key points that is important for me is having a culture of openness. Because when we have a culture of openness, we take responsibility and accountability. People know that they will be held accountable. But when there's fear, people are afraid to come forward and report unethical behavior or corruption or anything like that. And for me, anything can happen in that scenario because people need to feel safe. They need to know that if I come forward, I'll be protected and action will be taken. And then accountability and transparency, so key. Because when leaders are accountable, you know, action is taken. We have the situation where we're not able to address corruption in South Africa because we have leaders who are just not holding themselves accountable for the state of corruption in our country. So for me, accountability means that you take responsibility. And for me, good leaders are those who don't make excuses, who take responsibility, get on with the job that needs to be done, and they just get on with whatever needs to be done. But as soon as I hear anyone making excuses, I just know that there will be no change in that organization. You know, wherever I sit on boards, I always chair the Social and Ethics Committee because for me, boards are so critical in making sure that there's ethical leadership in the organizations. And the reason I do that is because it gives me an opportunity to use my influence on the topics that are important to me, which are transformation, ethics, and environment and social responsibility. So I always say that we need an ethics framework or whatever we can call it, a strategy, because they will always tell you that we have policies. You know, our policies cover all aspects of ethics. But for me, what a framework does is that it gives guidelines to everyone in terms of how are we managing ethics in this organization. Nothing is vague. And when I always also impress upon the fact that we have to measure, you know, do surveys to measure our maturity of the framework and whether we are even succeeding, you know, is it effective? Because if you don't measure, then you don't know whether it's effective or not. The other area for me is I've seen so much toxicity in corporate. And for me, this is something I'm very passionate about. So I drive values like we need to have policies to address corruption, to address bullying, to address discrimination and sexual harassment. We need to create environments that are healthy as leaders, psychologically safe spaces. And then the other topic is diversity and inclusion, which I'm really passionate about because it just becomes a tick box exercise. Even there, I make sure that there's a diversity and inclusion strategy that is clear, that everybody understands. And I measure that. You know, we have to monitor the progress we're making. Is there tangible progress? Is there tangible change that we can see? Moving on then to the other level of the topic, future